Welcome back, everyone. The year was 1973 and Bruce Lee was on top of the world. He had 3 successful Hong Kong films under his belt, a 4th one about to be released to a wider audience than ever before, and a 5th one in the middle of production. He was known not only for his martial skill and physicality, but also his philosopher's nature and charming personality. He was a hero to many, a teacher to others, an inspiration, a cornerstone, and agreeably someone with a very bright future ahead. Until the day this shining star suddenly went out, and this sudden passing has only intrigued many since then, and caused the man to become a myth, a legend beyond the material. But are there any lessons to take away from what happened? And what did actually happen? Why are we still so fascinated by it that we continue to theorize about what happens to this day? Let us now take a closer look and find out. It all started on the 10th of May 1973, during a day of post-production work for Enter the Dragon. The film required voiceover and ADR work, re-recording lines in a booth so that they will be clearer in the finished film. It was an intensely hot Los Angeles day, with a broken air conditioning system in a stuffy room that had poor ventilation. It is no wonder then that Bruce stated he needed to step out for a breath and a drink of water, only for him to collapse and pass out in the studio bathroom. Bruce was rushed to hospital, where he ran a fever of 105 degrees and swam in and out of consciousness, being finally diagnosed with cerebral edema, or excess fluid causing swelling in the brain, being given a dose of Maritol, a dehydrating agent, to lower the swelling, and after 2 hours of sudden bursts of violent seizures, which necessitated the restraint of his limbs, Bruce eventually regained consciousness. There were no physical causes for his symptoms, but it soon came to light that before this event, Bruce had eaten both a cannabis leaf and a nibble of a hash brownie. Perhaps don't put those ingredients in the next batch. As the weeks passed after this event, it seems that being in such a state had rocked Bruce to his core, as I'm sure it would for anyone, differing from his usual training routine and notably growing in anxiety. He had seen that his career was about to skyrocket with Enter the Dragon. More eyes would be on him than ever before, and the pressure would build to even more innumerable degrees than ever, and he was worried he was about to lose it all. As time wore on, he became more and more erratic, having sudden mood swings, becoming more isolated, and seeking more carnal ways to alleviate his worries, with more frequent instances of paranoia and amnesia, both of which worried his loved ones, as Bruce Lee became more untrusting of the people around him as his fame grew. But time waits for no one, and so production needed to continue for Game of Death, following Enter the Dragon's completion. On the 20th of July 1973, Bruce was scheduled to meet with Raymond Chow and George Lazenby, as Lazenby was in talks to appear in Game of Death. Meanwhile, Bruce Lee was on the other side of town in the apartment of actress Betty Ting Pei. It was another swelteringly hot day, and the apartment in question was considerably stuffy. Bruce began experiencing another round of headaches, and took an Ecogesic headache tablet for it, asking if he could rest for a while on Ting Pei's bed. The problem soon being that Bruce would not wake up. Severely worried, Ting Pei tried everything to make Lee wake up, before finally calling Raymond Chow for help. When Chow finally arrived at Betty's home, he also could not rouse him, calling an ambulance which took the dragon to Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and calling Bruce's wife Linda to let her know of the situation. The doctors tried to do all they could to save Bruce, trying for hours to rouse him, but it was already too late. Bruce Lee was dead.
Mozart is dead! Get your genuine death mask, fresh off the corpse. Be the first on your block to give me money.
Linda Lee almost immediately consented to an autopsy to discover the cause of just what had happened to her husband, performed by the British government forensic laboratories 3 days later. On the 3rd of September, an inquest was opened into the death of Bruce Lee. The evidence showed that Bruce's brain had swollen from 14,000 grams to 1.125 times its size. It was finally determined that Bruce had suffered an allergic reaction to the Aquagesic. But hold on, that leaves a lot of evidence on the floor here. I mean, what about the earlier health scare and near-death experience? Or the factor of the heat in both cases? Or just the fact that the reaction to the pill was so violent for one of the healthiest men in the world at the time? This just seems like such a slapdash conclusion for one of the highest regarded institutions in the world. And that's because it kind of was. In the time since this inquest, the involved doctors have given other, more rounded opinions of what happened to Bruce Lee. Lee's body fat percentage at the time of his passing was exceedingly low at around 1%, which we ourselves have documented looking through his films of how much weight he lost during the process of working on his various projects. and little time to rest between projects. He regularly ate cannabis leaves and nibbled on hash brownies, such as he did before the first health incident, explaining how he did this as a form of stress relief to, quote, slow down time and better process information with how hectic his life had become. And process is the right word, as without the regular levels of body fat and a much faster metabolism, it's posited that Bruce was more susceptible to the effects of the active ingredients in both substances, with the heat most likely catalyzing the process further in both cases. Recent evidence also claims that Bruce's kidneys had been damaged in the line of his work, making it more difficult for his body to process the compounds. The headache pill likely only exacerbated the already present issue. So this is a case where the drug use exacerbated the already existing issues that Bruce Lee had sustained in the process of making his way to the top. A tragic story in all circumstances. So why was this diagnosis not put forward in September 1973? Why was it only posited so many years later? The main reasons seem to be cultural rather than medical. Bruce Lee was a cultural hero, the one to show that the Chinese people had more to offer than insensitive stereotypes at Tiffany's or opium pipes. Bruce Lee made their landmark martial art cool and brought it officially to the West, forged careers for many, and raised the rights of his fellows by his mere example. Bruce brought action films in Hong Kong to the modern age. So if his sudden unexpected death was tied to the foreign evil leaf of cannabis, tied inextricably to the hardly working and disruptive hippie movement from the West, the brush painted would have been a vile one. It would have permanently tarnished the legacy of Bruce Lee and risked jeopardizing all he had stood for. Film needs its true hero. The cannabis usage was stricken from the record, and Bruce Lee's legacy was left untarnished. But even without the factor of drug use, the circumstances surrounding Bruce Lee's death were suspicious enough that it didn't really take long for people to begin theorizing about just how he had passed. The statement initially put out by Raymond Chow stated that Bruce had died at home, in his garden with his loving wife by his side. A romantic image that was immediately shattered. Reporter Henry Pawani snuck into the hospital to look into the ambulance call records, finding and reporting the day before the funeral that Bruce Lee had died in the home of Betty Ting Pei. But even immediately after his passing, many speculated ways the dragon died, ranging from being killed in a tournament, or that it was all a publicity stunt to promote his newest film, and others stating he had overdosed on an aphrodisiac. Okay. Or the more on-brand idea that he died in a drawn-out fight against 20 to 30 men who subsequently beat him to death. And in the time since 1973, many more theories have cropped up surrounding the circumstances around Bruce Lee's death, each one more elaborate than the last. One being that instead of a bad reaction, he was poisoned. This was a theory probably cooking ever since it was revealed that Bruce had died in Betty Ting Pei's home. The theory goes that Ting Pei was an illicit lover of the dragon and grew jealous of his marriage to Linda Lee, and so decided that if she could not have Bruce, then no one could, slipping more than a headache pill to Lee. But of course, if Bruce Lee was poisoned, surely it would have been flagged in the autopsy and toxicology report, unless it happened to be some untraceable poison. And I am sure an actress could not easily procure such an item, but a producer might. It is well known that Raymond Chow considered Bruce not just as a friend, but as the biggest cash cow on his payroll. And with Bruce making his way to Hollywood with Enter the Dragon, that cash was at risk of leaving Chow's hands. So why not poison him and conscript one of Bruce's lady friends to do it? But considering how there was still an unfinished film to complete, and that Bruce had decided to stay in Hong Kong for the time being, was Raymond Chow going to be so short-sighted? But there are more ways to kill a man than just with poison. The fact that Bruce Lee was embroiled in controversy is something we have already discussed. In some respects it was due to his work in film, and in other respects it was due to his teaching methods. His work in Jeet Kune Do was renowned for changing the way martial artists considered their technique, but he courted controversy by his contemporaries for teaching Westerners and moving away from tradition. This has led to sort of an evolution of the idea that he was killed in a fight. The dim mark theory, or the touch of death theory. The theory goes that in the months preceding his demise, he was struck with a deadly pressure point targeting blow by a wrathful martial artist who sought to silence Bruce's non-traditional ways. This attack was the cause of his kidney damage and subsequent passing.
This is starting to sound like a bad comic book plot.
Yes, a pressure point based assassination. That makes perfect sense and not, just regular sparring being the cause, or just the fact that his body fat percentage was so low, probably meaning that he was taxing his organs.
Everyone is stupid except me.
But what if the hand that killed Bruce Lee was not a human hand at all?
This final theory states that Bruce Lee was in fact the victim of a family curse, one which apparently led to his tragic passing, later led to the unfortunate passing of his son Brandon Lee during the filming of The Crow, putting aside the fact that his daughter Shannon is still breathing.
Okay, this is just getting ridiculous. In fact, this is the perfect theory, really, because you don't need any actual evidence for a family curse. And that's what really underpins this whole line of theories, in much the same way as true crime podcasts. Certainly, it is fun to get to the bottom of a mystery. Some line or explanation just doesn't make sense, and so you start to try and pull at the threads. I do a bit of amateur sleuthing. In some ways, it could even be seen as a tribute to a fallen hero, disregarding the fact that drudging up old memories or throwing out half-baked theories could only exacerbate the hurt of loved ones. It's some self-serving crusade of amateur sleuthing, which all misses out on the most crucial part of how Bruce Lee died. He was human. What killed him was in equal parts his desire to succeed and sacrifice everything on his way to the top, coupled with vice and fallacy. A story which has played out in celebrity culture far too many times. There were those that profited from his success, certainly, and those that wanted a slice of the pie, which probably further contributed to his downfall. With the often overlooked point being that the man himself had limits. But a legend doesn't. The legend of Bruce Lee is immortal, but the man himself was just as mortal as any one of us. He left behind a great legacy. That is more than most of us will probably do. But in the end, we cannot dwell on what could have happened or what would have happened. There is only what did happen. And what will happen is a matter for next time. So until then, everyone, peace be with you.